Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere he leads me in this world below. Anywhere without him dearest joys would fade. Anywhere with Jesus I am not afraid. Anywhere, anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus I am not alone. Other friends may fail me, he is still my own. Though his hand may lead me over drearest ways, anywhere with Jesus is a house of praise. Anywhere, anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus over land and sea, telling souls in darkness of salvation free. Ready as he summons me to go or stay. Anywhere with Jesus when he points the way. Anywhere, anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus I can go to sleep, when the darkening shadows round about me creep, knowing I shall wake and nevermore to roam. Anywhere with Jesus will be home, sweet home. Anywhere, anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control, that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate, and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the fates shall beside. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul. It is well with my soul. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land where my possessions lie. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and dwell with Jesus evermore. O'er all those wide extended plains shines one eternal day. There God the Son forever reigns and scatters night away. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and dwell with Jesus evermore. When shall I reach that happy place and be forever blessed? When shall I see my Father's face and in his bosom rest? We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and dwell with Jesus evermore. Filled with delight, my raptured soul would here no longer stay. Though Jordan's waves around me roll, fearless I'd launch away. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and dwell with Jesus evermore. Oh, in the grave he lay, Jesus my Savior, waiting the coming day. Jesus my Lord. Up from the grave he arose with a mighty triumph o'er his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Vainly they watch his bed, Jesus my Savior. Vainly they seal the dead, Jesus my Lord. Up from the grave he arose with a mighty triumph o'er his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Death cannot not keep his prey.
Started. I hate to interrupt the good conversations that are taking place. But appreciate you being here. Appreciate the classes that came in here to be a part of this session. We are thankful for the elders for lining up our speaker this week. He's a man that probably most of us know very well. He's been here on several occasions, Brother Ralph Gilmore, and we appreciate him, his dedication, appreciate his enthusiasm, appreciate his family. He's got his other wife Joyce with him today. Certainly glad to have him with us, and so we're not going to take up a whole lot of his time right now. We get a stronger introduction a little bit to everybody in here. But Brother Ralph, we appreciate you. Appreciate you being here. We turn class over to you. Are you in that worship?
Whoa, works. Good morning. So, here's my wife, Joyce. So we've been married 50 years. Yeah, 50. And let's see, ate last night with Larry and Carol at some restaurant. He said, we're going to be eating at the ranch house. Okay, so I checked my Google. It says, where's the ranch house? There's no ranch house in Lexington. The name of it is the farmhouse. Okay, so we ate at the farmhouse last night. Had a really good time, talked a lot. And it was good to see you. Justin, actually, so good to see you. I'm proud of what you do. You know, I'm glad that you are here. A lot of you I know. Matter of fact, I better not go any further right now. But I'm glad to be here. Congratulations to Cade, by the way, on finishing his PhD in English at Notre Dame. And Debbie, good to see. Well, I said I was not going to do it. Here I am doing it. Okay, I got stuff to do. All right. One of the things that became this is class, and I don't have to have the coat on. Okay, one of the things that I learned at Freed Hardeman is that increasingly the students that I was teaching were not speaking my language. And part of the problem, that's actually one of the reasons why I wrote the book Pleasing God, is because I was seeing a disconnect between the group that was coming up and the way that I did it. So today, here's what Larry assigned to me. And thank you very much. I changed the order a little bit, but that's what we're doing this week. 6 lessons and 3 today. Hey, by the way, we're doing Church Eat Church. Yes. Okay, so all of that's going to be good today. Y'all know what Church Eat Church is? Okay, we're going to do church, eat church. All right, so let's do Bible study first. And here's the problem. I was speaking, so one of the deals was, but I had to pull that on. One of the deals was talking about increasing Bible study. And reviving Bible study has been a problem for a long time. With all of us. I mean, I don't guess any of us study as much probably as we should unless you're, Alexander Campbell or somebody who got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and stayed 3 hours before breakfast. They said that about Gus Nichols too. They would study an awful lot. But one of the things that was happening is that they're not speaking my language. And the language that I was speaking is what is now known as CENI. C-E-N-I. Command, example, necessary inference. Command, example, necessary inference. Hey, brother. So whenever you see that's my language. Why? Because that came from my generation. I mean, that came from Thomas B. Warren and the many classes that I had with Thomas B. Warren. Command, example, except he didn't believe this particular part, so I thought, well, we're going to do this, and then we're going to talk about a newer way of doing it, because Larry's idea is, what do you do to increase Bible study? And one way that you don't do it with young people is to teach them CENI, because I've tried it for 39 years, and it didn't work. All right, so when we talk about this then, here's the Declaration and Address from 1809. Thomas Campbell actually is writing for a group of people in Philadelphia, who met and talked about how do you restore the New Testament church. So when he came back, he didn't know that his son, by the way, was in the midst of doing the same thing. All right, so the Church of Christ, he said, is essentially, intentionally, constitutionally one, and all that kind of stuff. And then he says in verse 3, we should do things that are only expressed by approved president, etc. But actually, he didn't like necessary inference. He liked command, example, but he didn't like necessary inference. And that would be, okay, they went into the water, and he baptized him. All right, you should know from the text who's baptizing whom in Acts 8. All right, Philip and the eunuch. So he baptized him. All right, so that would be what they would call necessary inference. But Campbell did not like them at all. So what he talked about basically was command and example. Now here's his son. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, But apparently, after being shipwrecked over in Scotland, they meet each other on horseback, and Thomas Campbell theoretically had a copy of the Declaration and Address in the saddlebags of his horse. And he wanted to share it with his son. And he didn't know that his son was thinking some of these same ideas about how to restore the New Testament church, because they both came out of a Presbyterian background. And since they were Presbyterian, and later on Thomas Campbell became a Baptist. But at the time, Presbyterian would mean the 5 steps of Calvinism. The tulip, total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance. And so they both believe them. All right, but now they're coming to think, no, wait a minute, this is not what the Bible teaches. And so Campbell wrote in a book extensively, 92 pages of text. He tries to explain how you interpret the Bible. This is the way Campbell would do that. It took him 3 years to propose to his wife. Because he was prolific. He wrote a lot. And so here's what he said. Rule 1, consider the historical circumstances of the book. Rule 2, observe who it is who speaks and under which dispensation he officiates. Number 3, the same philological or language principles are the same laws of interpretation according to Scripture as they apply to other books. Rule 4, figure out how the words are used in common usage. Rule 5, in all tropical language, i.e. figures of speech, like Jesus says, I am the door. Okay, in rule 6, in the use of symbols, ascertain the point to be illustrated only. Rule 7, we must come within the understanding distance of God so that we can understand God better. So that was his big 7 rules, but I couldn't find any from him. Okay, so this is where I found any. And that would be the students of Alexander Campbell. In this case, it would be, Moses E. Lard at the left. Boy, wouldn't you hate to be Lard? But anyway, Moses E. Lard is on the left. And then on the right is the first guy, J.W. McGarvey, who was a Rhodes Scholar in the Church of Christ. And he was the president of a school in Lexington, Kentucky. All right, so they did teach that. And I don't have time to necessarily go through all this for you, but they did teach command, example, necessary inference. Here's a reference from Moses E. Lard. And then here's something similar from McGarvey. The loudest call that comes from heaven to the men of this generation is for warfare, stern, relentless, merciless, exterminating against anything not expressly or by necessary implication authorized in the New Testament. There you go. Necessary inference. Expressly, command. Or an example or necessary inference. And so our sinning heritage in the Church of Christ goes back more to them, at least in my research, than to the Campbells. Now, did you know what sinning was for this morning? Raise your hands if you knew what sinning was. Okay, how many people knew what sinning was before I talked about it? All right, how many of you now understand that this is the way you've been thinking for years? Hands up. All right, so this is the way you've been thinking for years. All right, and why have you been thinking this way? Well, because in my case, it was Thomas B. Warren. Because I had him in class, and he wrote the book, When is an Example Binding, in 1979 or so. And he talked about these things specifically in that book, except I've talked with other students who had him. You won't find the 4 in the book. You'll find 3 in the book. Demand, direct statements, implication, direct statements. All right, Larry, please do this. Direct statement. All right, implication is like, and he baptized him. All right, an account of approved action would be the same thing that we would call an example, except Brother Warren didn't like that because you have an example when Judas hanged himself. All right, so you got to have more than that. It's got to be an account of an approved action. So we learned AAA Travel Club from Thomas B. Warren. All right, and so there you go, an account of an approved action. And then finally, expediency is not in the book, but I promise you, talking with students like David Lipe and Dick Stanyu and others who had him for many, many classes, I guarantee you he taught a 4th category, and the 4th category is expediency, like the Lord's Supper. All right, theoretically, COVID has taught us that this is an expedient, which means it doesn't really have to be passed. You don't have to have arguments over who passes the Lord's Supper because you got it yourself. Another thing is, maybe I guess it's more hygienic or whatever, but boy, have you ever tasted those that tasted like styrofoam and you're just thinking, man, this ain't right. Okay, now this tastes better. Okay, but you say, is it an expedient? Well, yeah, you got the bread and you got the fruit of the vine, and there it is in a container. And the Bible doesn't say not to do it, so it is an expedient during days of COVID. So you see an expedient? All right, they're up in the upper story room. Not an expedient. Do not have to be in the upper story room. But nonetheless, to take the Lord's Supper as Jesus said to do it, in Luke 21 and Matthew 26 and 1 Corinthians, all of that stuff. Okay, in those passages, what we're seeing then is that we've learned more about expedience in times like this. Now, this would be a terrible time during COVID to be a one-cupper. Because if I was a one-cupper church, I'd be sitting on the front row. and why is that? Because you're drinking out of the one cup. All right, so where did that come? Well, that's Thomas B. Warren. And then for a few years, I thought, well, I don't like Thomas B. Warren, but it took me a long time to say this, and I never said it to his face, and I didn't say it until after he died. Okay, but I disagreed with Thomas B. Warren because it doesn't start with direct statement, since it nowhere says, Ashley Rogers, do this. It doesn't say, Joyce Gilmore, do this. It doesn't say anywhere my name. So I have to use implication to even figure out whether or not the Bible's talking to me. So it all starts with implication because my name is not there. There are no direct statements to Ralph. Now, if you want to talk about a direct statement, you're going to have to do it by implication. All right, so I changed the order of that, and rather than accounts of approved action, I just call it prescriptive actions, kind of more like F. LaGarde Smith talks about in his book. And then finally, the category of expediency. So I taught that for a while. But remember, it didn't go over well. So here's the deal. And yet, many in this generation don't get it. They don't get it, whatever the reason is. It's not because they're not smart. Because, like I said, I taught at Fred Hardman for 39 years. Why didn't I go for 40? Because I didn't want to. Okay, and so I taught for 39 years. All right, so here's the deal. Even many of my students at Fred Hardman did not understand this. I don't care how much you lecture on it, they don't get it. It'd be like talking to them. We went to the restaurant, and Joyce ordered an Arnold Palmer. And she said to the waitress, do you know what that is? She said, yeah, I should know who he was. Okay, so she didn't know who Arnold Palmer was. We need to slap her jaws. I mean, how in the world? Anybody here play golf? How could you not know who Arnold Palmer was? But she's a kid. And so because she's young, she doesn't know that. She knows the names of groups. I don't even ask. Whenever some of my daughters go to a music group, I don't know the names of any of them. Because even if they come back with a T-shirt that tells me the group that they went to here in Nashville or whatever, I don't know who that is. All right, so you see there is a disconnect there. So that made me wonder, boy, there's got to be another way to do this. About this time, Jesse Robertson moves in the office across from me. And then a little later on, Matt Cook is over there. That was some of the worst days of my life. No, I'm just kidding. I love Matt. All right, and so we'd have Nerf gun stuff. And so we'd talk about how do you try to teach the new generation how to study the Bible in a way that they get. Because the other, they don't get. Okay, and so Duvall and Hayes, I made a presentation on this at an ETS meeting. And I didn't make a lot of presentations at ETS, but I did make this one. And Danny Hayes was actually there. They are Baptists who teach Wichita University, which is not too far from Searcy, an hour or so from Searcy. And so he was actually there, and he brought his students. He said he wanted to hear a Church of Christ view, as he viewed it, as to what we would think about what they were doing. Now, there's more than one edition of this, but I'm just going to simplify it today. So you got 5 things to remember. And most Fred Hardman students can remember these quite well. They just can't remember sinning. All right, here are the 5. All right, number 1, you got to try to figure out what does it mean to the original people to whom it was written. What does it mean to them? In the first century world, or in the Old Testament, in the 8th century BC world, whatever it was, what did it mean to them? So whenever this was said, boy, I won't even tell you what this means, but what does it mean that Saul covered his feet? I mean, what in the world does that mean? What does it mean that? And then all of a sudden, you're trying to figure out what did it mean to them? I've worked through translators quite a deal, not as much as Larry. Larry said he's been to 23 or 24, 25 countries in the Caribbean because everybody keeps kicking him out. But he goes, and he's been to maybe 40 countries. Well, I've been to about 40 countries, but I haven't been to that many countries in the Caribbean. Well, there's some places that you need to go to know, like in Nassau. You need to know that when we were there, Carol, the girls were not allowed to wear pants. You remember that? Okay, and why is that? Because no woman could represent the church, whatever the church was, if she was wearing pants. That means then that your pants are speaking louder than your message. So what you need to understand is that I'd say to my girls, okay, I'm sorry, it's hot here, but you cannot wear pants. You've got to wear a decent, skirt or blouse or whatever. Carried a group to Africa. One sweet girl that some of you probably knew, when she sat down, you could see her knees. Well, some of the women went nuts. of the church there in Africa because you could see her knees. Okay, so I said, girls, I don't know what you're going to have to do here. You have to pin something on the bottom of your skirt or whatever. I don't want to see no more knees. Okay, there's not going to be any knees seen in Africa. And why is that? Because it's understanding the culture where you are delivering the message. It's also called contextualization. But you understand what's going on there. Now, by the way, remember, this is in parts of Nigeria. I've seen a woman be baptized before taking off her outer wrapper, and she's exposed frontally, but no knees. No knees. All right, and so you say that's very important. All right, so number one, I want to understand, well, what was it like to the original culture? And therefore, I'm going to try to grasp the text in their town first, because I cannot assume that it means the same thing to me. Now, concerning the things whereof you wrote into me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Well, you're touching a woman, and I'm touching a woman for 50 years. So what does Paul mean when he says it is good for a man not to touch a woman? Well, you're going to have to understand something about the context of Corinth. All right, so grasp the text in the town. Now, here are some questions that they would kind of recommend. Carefully study the text. Try to figure out what the meaning of the passage is for the original audience in one or two sentences. If you want to do this in a 5-step process, then get you a piece of paper. And so step one. All right, this is what I think I'm learning from the original text. All right, and then you use past tense verbs and refer to the biblical audience because Paul commanded the Israelites to. Paul encouraged the Ephesians to. So see, that's past tense. That means it was before us, a long time ago for many of us. You know, it's for all of us, it was a long time ago. So what was meant by that? What is meant inside the town? Now, that's very important when you think about inside the town. Now, it would be almost difficult, it'd be almost impossible to try to translate this for you, but I've been to the double kiss places before. I've been to Lima, and you double kiss, mwah, mwah, right cheek, left cheek. And I didn't mind that so much. The women were usually shorter. And so you bend over and you do the double kiss thing. Now, this is not random people on the street, but this is people at church. Okay, so people at church, you do mwah, mwah, and that's fine. Usually, you know, your lips don't even touch the cheek unless they really are glad to see you. And if they're really glad to see you, they will lay it on you. Okay, but you know, instead of right cheek, left cheek. All right, and I thought, okay, I got this, I can do it. Well, then I went to Argentina. Okay, Argentina, the guys do it. We're talking about gaucho guys. We're talking about tough men, you know, who can chew iron and spit out nails. We're talking about tough guys that do this, and they kiss. All right, and I got there, and I'm just thinking, this ain't going to translate well in Tennessee. I mean, there's no way that we're going to do this because somebody is going to get killed. You know, somebody's going to be taken before the discipline board or something because you can't do this at Freed Hardeman. And so when I left after a few days with Glenn Hinton, one of the elders there, Juan Fuentes, you kissed me on both cheeks. I mean, he didn't do the air kiss either. I mean, he kissed me on both cheeks. And I've got to admit, right before I got on the plane, it was pretty nice. But it doesn't translate well here. Let me give you, for instance, locally. You go to New Orleans, and you decide the beignets there are wonderful. And you buy some beignet mix, and you bring it to Tennessee, and what happens to it? It ain't the same. And if anything, it sits right there in your cupboard until it gets worms. You know, because it is not the same as sitting across from St. Louis, the Doodah Cathedral. It is not the same as doing that in New Orleans. So you bring it home and it's not the same. That's what I mean by in your town. Let's see. Another, for instance, I was attending a funeral in Nigeria. And this woman's mother had died. And as the deal is in many parts of Africa, the preacher, not the elders, because there's not usually many elders in the whole country, the preacher sits in a chair facing everybody. Well, I'm a visiting preacher, and Paul Swartz is a visiting preacher. Some of you know he's a doctor in Henderson. Okay, so we're there because we are dignitaries and we're facing the people. Okay, so we do this thing. I don't know why we're there, but we're doing this thing. And then afterwards, they bury this woman in the floor of her daughter's bedroom. Did you hear what I just said? 6 feet down, they buried her in the floor of her daughter's bedroom. That means that every night there's a son-in-law, Well, never mind. Okay, so what I'm thinking is that's a little close to your mother-in-law. All right, so, and why? That is their culture. That is their culture. Would you understand that? Wouldn't even expect you to. Not going to try to transfer it to this culture. Doesn't work. But it does help you to understand that culture. In Scotland, that's a sign of pornography. To say that you're under the weather in Scotland means you're dead drunk. So a preacher got up and said, I'm a little under the weather today. And to the Scottish audience, they're thinking, man, he's drunk. And so you don't say that. So there's some things that you have to learn about in the hometown. All right, number 2. All right, measure the width of the river that you have to cross. And sometimes that river is as broad as a flooding Mississippi River. Trying to figure out how much distance is there between you and the original audience. Now, I had Justin as a student, and I knew that he was good at languages. He was also pretty good in seminar. And so when I think about, there's some people that are going to be able to have linguistic abilities that some of the rest of us don't necessarily have. But that's okay. We all kind of balance it out. We all have stuff in other areas that we're good at. So I remember Mark Blackwelder, head of the Bible department at School of Biblical Studies at Freed-Hardeman. In about 6 or 7 months, he was preaching in Slovak when he was living there in Bratislava, Slovakia. That's one of the hardest languages in the world, a very guttural language, and he's preaching in Slovak. Let me just tell you, the average person cannot do that unless they have the first century gift of tongues. The average person cannot do that. But some people can. And if you can talk to people in their language, that is a major advantage. It also says to them, even if you're not good at it, Larry, I don't know how much Spanish you speak, but even if you're not good at it, most Spanish people appreciate it if you try it. Now there's cultures that's not necessarily true. I'm not sure that I'd try that in France. But nonetheless, there are some cultures where it's okay if you butcher the language if they can tell that you are trying. Even if you don't exactly get it right. I remember Chris Fry's wife, Vicky, some of you might know them, when they were overseas in Asuncion, Paraguay, she was beginning to get her Spanish going and stuff. And so she meant to say to the women after they had visited for 2 hours and eaten for a while, I need to go home and feed my dog. Well, in Spanish, she said, I need to go home and eat my dog. Okay, and so sometimes, that doesn't work well. But the women, they just laughed at it and went on with it. Why? Because you're trying to get across that bridge. That bridge. And you're trying to figure out what principles are there that will help you to understand that better. Now, for most of us, it might not necessarily be learning the language. But everybody has access to the internet. And that means you have an incredible wealth of information at your disposal if you want to find out about a local culture. Now, some of it might be exaggerated. Some of it might be totally wrong. But if you do enough reading, you can get an idea of what it's like to cross that bridge. Notice they call it a principalizing bridge, which means you're looking for principles here in the Bible that will communicate to you. But the problem is, step 2, is you got this culture, language thing. It's a different time, different situation. It's like when I became a Bible major at Freed-Hardeman, it was 1969. I cannot even begin to tell students today, Brady, what it was like to try to make a decision to become a Bible major during the Vietnam War, because they're not going to understand it. That means, of course, to a lot of people, oh yeah, you're becoming a Bible major. Why? Well, they're going to rate you as 4D, which means they're going to draft you just right before they get the people that are totally paralyzed. Okay, and so 4D is just like one step above 4F, and if you become a Bible major, you're 4D. Well, I wanted to be in the Air Force, and so I registered, and I think my random sequence number was 271 out of 366 possibilities, so I might not have gotten drafted anyway, but it is difficult to explain to the Bible majors at Freed-Hardeman what it was like to make that decision in 1969. Because I felt like I went ahead and registered, even though I became a Bible major. I went ahead and registered because I didn't want anybody to say, he's avoiding the draft. And so, can I communicate that well to students? No. Maybe Desert Storm, but even then, that's, 1993? That doesn't communicate either. If you talk about Putin maybe and invading the Ukraine, then they'll be able to talk to you. But otherwise, it's difficult for you to get by that time and situation and language and cultural barrier there. So therefore, to ask some questions, you need to ask those specific questions. What was the culture like in the time in which this was written? For instance, people say, well, there was no culture with Adam and Eve. Why? Well, because there's no people. So the only culture they had was each other. But Moses wrote from within a culture when he wrote about it. So there are no books in the Bible that are not written within the framework of a culture. None. Zero. So if you think the Bible is to you, you're going to have to try to figure out how to adjust it for culture. Now, therefore, you ask the questions, well, how wide is the river here? Or we have a lady, Joan, who is a Greek at Woodbury Church of Christ, where we work now, part-time. I don't work anywhere full-time. Why? Because I don't want to. But Eddie Bogus is the full-time preacher, and so I get to, kind of do what I want to do. Got a sweet little Greek lady. Well, if we talk to her about a Greek word, maybe it'll be the same as the ancient Greek, and she will know a little bit about what you're saying because she speaks Greek. All right, so the river for her might be a little more narrow. She was born in Greece. And right now we have a couple, Keith and Tricia Young, who have just come back from furlough, where they are missionaries there with Dino Roussos in Athens. So they are learning Greek culture every day and trying to learn how to get things done. In some countries, like when our Freed Hardman students will go to the, what's the name of it, guys? What's the name of our campus there? In Verviers. Okay, whenever they go there, they don't understand what it is like to spend all day having to get groceries. They don't understand that. Because we go to the store, and you can get 95% of whatever you want at Walmart, or Kroger, or whatever, and you go home, right? Well, to a lot of them, you have to go to this place for your potatoes, and this place for your bread, and this place, and by the time you've done that, you've used up most of the day just grocery shopping for the week. And that's acceptable because that's the way they do it in the culture. In Russia, I decided we were going to buy some bread, so we enter the store where they gave us a ticket to get permission to go in the store. Okay, so we got permission to go in the store. Then we went to a central area there, and they gave us another ticket to go to the bakery area. Then when we went to the bakery area, we got another ticket to go to where the bread was. The sliced bread. And so then, whenever it's time to check out, you got to give all your tickets back to everybody that you got tickets from, and you just wanted to buy bread. I did that. And I learned, wow. You know what else I learned? In Russia in 1993, they got one type of bread. If you don't want it, you don't have to have it. They got one type of bread, that's it. And if you're lucky enough to get bread that day, that's the bread that you get. And you don't look up and down at all the various kinds of bread, whole wheat, and all this stuff. You either get it or you don't get it. So it's going to be difficult for us to understand this without understanding step number 3. Cross the principal bridge. This is the one that I would adjust a little bit. What is the theological principle behind this? Because sometimes the principle is tied up in the pattern. Like we're going to do the Lord's Supper. Does it have theological significance? Yes. Dustin, what is it? Theological significance of the Lord's Supper. A little louder, please.
It represents the death and burial of Jesus.
All right, so is that theological?
Yes.
Okay. But what if the pattern is tied in with the principle? Like baptism. What if, here's the idea, we want forgiveness of our sins. What if being baptized is the pattern that allows you to access the principle? And that is not explained so well in step 3. So, I've said in the past, sometimes you have to look to see if there is a reason. Now, is it possible to find patterns where the Bible does not find patterns? Yes. I think our non-institutional brethren do it all the time. In other words, they think, well, to do mission work, then you have to go directly to the hands of elders and all that kind of stuff, and you can't help people who are not members of the church. Once saints only benevolence and that kind of stuff. So I think that they found patterns where they're not patterns. So that's one problem. When I, find patterns that really I don't think God ever intended, the opposite is I'm obtuse, or I don't get a pattern that God said he wanted. So am I a pattern theologist? No. Do I believe in patterns? Yes. So if we talk about that, that's not clear with the principalizing bridge, because sometimes you may run across something, and like we went to a veiled church one time. Why? Because the women was ugly. No, we went to a veiled, no, that's not true. But we went to a veiled, because the men were even uglier. Okay, we went to a veiled church one time, and we had a campaign, and I didn't know this until we got there. I had 30 people from Campbell Street, Debbie, who went on this campaign in California. And when we got there, women were wearing a napkin on their head. And then I thought, okay, this is not a problem unless it's a problem, right? Okay, because they think that 1 Corinthians 11, verses 1 through 16, is a pattern, not just a principle, but a pattern that the women should do this. Now, another story is, katakalupto means to hang in front, and parabolaion means to wrap around. Neither of which do you do with a little napkin on your head. Well, anyway, that's beside the point. So we thought, we're going to work here. We have vacation Bible school going on in the morning, door knock in the afternoon, gospel meeting in the evening. Okay, so everything's going to be fine, right? And so, not a problem. No elders. Okay, so 5 of our girls in the group stayed with a lady there who kept them up to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning trying to explain to them the more excellent way of women wearing a veil. Okay, so they come to me the next day, and we have a meeting with the men the next day. And I said to them, that plan that we came in on? It also goes back. Okay, and we'll be leaving here if you try to bind this on our girls. If you, the ladies here, want to wear the veil, that's fine. If you want to bind that pattern on all the women, then we are not going to get along well unless you can stop this. And by the way, they did stop it. And by the way, one of our girls in the campaign married a guy from there. All right, so they did stop it. So can you err either way? And the answer is yes. Besides that, Thomas B. Warren said there's no such thing as err. The word is err. Okay, so you can't err to the left or to the right. You're trying to figure out what does the text say. All right, and that would be the principal bridge. Now, how do I know about that? Well, with what I understand from step 1 and step 2, return to the original meaning and try to identify a broader theological principle from the text. What is it that's trying to be taught with the veil? It's not just the veil, but it was the short hair. And so you understand something about the culture at Corinth, and you understand something about the long hair for the men and the short hair for the women, associating them with the wrong group. Besides that, remember, Samson had hair. And I don't know how many exactly 200 shekels is, but Absalom had that much hair. It didn't serve him well. He got caught in the bough of a tree. But nonetheless, he had a lot of hair. We used to say that about the old men's pictures in Chapel Hall. Remember Chapel Hall at Freed Hardeman? And we were surrounded by dudes with long hair, and then the people from the pulpit telling us it's a sin to have long hair. All right, and so, whoa, wait a minute. What's the point here? Well, in the 70s, long hair was often associated with rebellion against the Vietnam War. Does it mean that now? No. It doesn't mean that now, but at the time, it did. And so you're looking for what's the principle here that's being taught. All right, then step 4 is going to be, now look at what you know from other parts of the Bible. From other parts of the Bible, let's see if this fits well in your understanding there. Like not being able to find Ranch House Restaurant, but as soon as you said, oh, it's over by Jackson State, well, then I punched in Jackson State, and boom, took us right to it. I didn't even know there was an office at Jackson State here. All right, and so we went right to it. Why? But it won't work unless you understand the map. You have to understand the map. How does this fit into this, fit into this? How does it do that? And it's really a marvelous study. Even if you don't read Greek or Hebrew, you can do every one of the rest of these for yourself. And if you don't read Greek or Hebrew, then sit down with multiple translations, good study Bible, stuff on the internet that's free, and do some study for yourself. All right, and so step 4 means then, okay, so what does that look like in the rest of the Bible? If the principle is valid, it should fit other principles that are valid in the Bible, because if it doesn't, you got a problem. Why? Ryan, good to see you, brother. Tell Sandy I said hello. Okay, all right, so whenever you see that, you got a problem if you think it says this here and it says this over here. All right, I'll give you for instance. Jesus, was he submissive to God the Father? Yes. Was he God? Yes. You got a problem. All right, what's the problem? How can God be submissive to anybody? Like you're trying to teach the little kids, how old is God? Who is God's mother? Did God's mother fix his clothes? You know, that kind of stuff. And they ask these questions about God because they don't understand God means forever. So if God means forever, then how can Jesus be submissive to God the Father? Because my job is to do the work that you gave me to do. All authority has been given to me. It was in heaven, now on earth, except the tense seems to indicate that the authority starts in heaven and has been given to God, to Jesus on earth. And so now you got a problem. How do you work it out? Well, you study. That's what you do. You study. How can women be both submissive to men in the male spiritual leadership principle, and yet they are equal to men in Galatians 3:28? How can they do that? So that's what I mean by saying you got a principle here, and then I read over here, and then I might try to say, well, wait a minute, I might have to adjust something here because I got a contradiction. And why can God not do contradictions? Do y'all talk in class? Why can God not do contradictions? All right, he's perfect. Is he the author of confusion? Is he the author of peace? Does he ever tell a lie? Titus 1 and verse 2. All right, in Hebrews 6, 17 and 18, do we find out that by 2 immutable things God cannot lie? All of that having been said, I need to look at the totality of the map to see if I can figure out what is really the truth. Just when we left the hotel this morning, a guy was on there trying to tell everybody that Jehovah God was the only God that existed and Jesus was not God. Well, I wanted to bust the television. Okay, and the reason why is he's not giving them the whole story, and he was giving them a mistranslation of John 1. All right, say it with me. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, they got to do something with that phrase, the Word was God, because if you don't believe that Jesus was God, and it says the Word was God, you're going to have to do something with that. So what they're going to do is come up with their own translation of that. And lead people astray who don't read Greek and don't know that that's an imbecilic, sort of mistake to make. You don't make a mistake like that. So whenever we see that, that tells us there. All right, then number 5, step 5. Okay, now it's time for me to try to figure out what does this look like on April the 17th. It's a mistake that I'm here because when this was set up by PJ 2 or 3 years ago, he never considered that Easter was this late. Okay, and I never considered that Easter was this late because I got 8 grandchildren, and we probably will be doing some eggs, and we're probably going to do that after church, eat church. We're probably going to drive to Jackson and do some Easter stuff, some egg stuff. North American mammals that lay eggs. Go figure. Okay, and so we're probably going to do some of that stuff, later on. But whenever we think about it, now what does that mean to me right now? Right now, this day, 2022, what does that look like in my life? That's the point that a lot of preachers never get to. They don't get to step 5 because it's more fun to try to deal with textual stuff. And then the audience are trying to figure out, well, that's wonderful. Well, what does that mean to me? It's like, what if I'd stopped this lesson at the end of sinning? And you'd have said, well, that's very interesting, Brother Ralph. I'm glad you did some research on that. Thank you very much. Now, what's for lunch? Okay, and you never get the point. This is about me. So I'm going to give you the Joyce Principle. Are you ready? The Joyce Principle is this. I had preaching in Campbell Street at the time, David, and I preached what I thought was a good lesson on a hard passage, and I had done my work and all that kind of stuff, and I was thinking, yeah. Okay, so ask Joyce. Now, I don't know, Justin, if you asked Ashley this or not. But I asked Joyce, okay, so how'd you like the lesson today? She said, it was all right, which probably means it was as bad as sin. Okay, it probably means it was bad, okay? All right, what point are you trying to tell me? She said, what I really need is something to help me to make it through the week. That's what I really need. So, that's what we're going to try to do this week. We're going to try to do some things to help you make it through the week. I've laid out before you a way that you can study for yourself. You don't have to have this. The PowerPoint's on the computer. If you want to access it this way, you can try to study it that way. Or if you like Discovery Bible Study, and we ask you to send you to Discovery Bible Study, and it's a 3-step process, which helps people to come to the Lord basically using their own way of interpreting the Bible, and you're not telling them what the Bible says. You let them try to commit themselves into being a Christian. So use that. But whatever it is, use something. You know, whatever it is that you do, use something. I used to do open forum, and they don't see how much study that you're doing. I would ask Justin and Earl Rogers and Doug Burleson and Billy Smith and Mark Blackwelder into a meeting the hour before open forum to study the questions that we knew that were coming in. Of course, this was the days before the open microphones ended. I know that means I got 5 minutes. Okay, but what I'm saying is that, okay, so I'd stand up there, and often I would be giving answers that these other men had helped me to understand better. I'd say, Justin, what's this Hebrew word mean here? Or Doug, what's this Greek word mean? And then we would study together. So then when I got to go to open forum, that would cover about 75% of the questions. The rest of them were just random people coming to the microphone and asking dumb stuff. All right, but anyway, they'd come to the microphone, and you can't get ready for that. But then people would say, wow, Brother Ralph, you must study all the time. Okay, or they would say to my daughters who went to Fried Hardeman, they'd say, does your dad ever have fun? I mean, does he like to study? And the answer is no, hairball. I don't study all the time. But you have to find the balance in your life. You have to find a place for God. You have to do it. Because a Christian who doesn't know why he or she is a Christian is not going to be able to use his or her faith to try to lead somebody else to Christ. And so it's not my faith. It's not somebody else's faith. It's the faith that you have, that you own, and that you use. That's what it's about. Now, what does this look like in my life today? So sometimes then I've got to ask some embarrassing questions like, okay, Joyce, have I changed? Yes, my hair has fallen and my beard's thicker than it's ever been, and I got hair growing in my ears. Okay, so does all that happen when you get older? Yeah. Okay, you can look forward to that. Except for Larry. Larry's getting older, hadn't lost a hair. Okay, but most of us lose hair. All right, and so we say, okay, what I want to know then is, how do I try to talk to this age group or this age group? I'm still speaking to youth groups, and I'm AARP, and I'm thinking, guys, come on. I'm too old for this. But the main thing is not your age. The main thing is whether or not you can connect. Can you connect? So if you have a Bible study that will connect well with young people, then theoretically it's going to help them a lot more get into the Word, because otherwise they're just going to be a Christian and they don't really have a good reason why. Thank you.